They do not miss you, so let us be clear about that right now. When you finally cut off communication, a narcissistic individual is not grieving your soul. They are simply mourning the loss of their favorite and most reliable appliance. But here's what actually happens when they realize you have permanently switched off that connection. It is not just sudden anger, but a chaotic and desperate scramble to turn the lights back on, and you need to see exactly what that dynamic looks like. When you cut them off, you are not merely leaving a relationship because you are inflicting a deep and jagged personal injury. They are forced to stare into the abyss of their own emptiness, and they despise you for making them see it. They will cycle through sudden panic, explosive rage, and a chillingly calculated smear campaign. Yet the most dangerous part of all is the Hoover maneuver. That is the exact moment they come crawling back, not with genuine love, but with a script designed to test whether you are still broken enough to play your old role. If you have ever wondered why they seem so icy cold one minute and so surprisingly remorseful the next, you need to understand the hidden mechanics of their desperation. To grasp why they react so intensely to prolonged absence, you must shift how you view the past. You operated under the assumption that you were a true partner, a genuine friend, or a loved one. But to them, you were never an individual in the human sense. You were merely supply in their mental landscape. People are categorized strictly by their daily utility, which means the amount of validation, status, ego boost, and emotional stabilization they can provide. Think of yourself as a trusted device they relied upon to keep their internal world steady. When you finally implement complete silence, you are not just walking away from a friend, because you are effectively pulling the plug on their primary power source. Because they lack an integrated sense of self-worth, they rely entirely on the outside world to define who they are. They act like emotional vampires, requiring a constant stream of external attention to prevent themselves from crashing into an agonizing state of worthlessness. When you sever that supply line, you deprive them of the very fuel they use to keep their false persona alive. This is precisely why their reaction is so shockingly disproportionate. They do not experience your departure as a healthy boundary or the sad ending to a chapter. Instead, they experience it as a life-threatening deprivation. Without your constant feedback, your attention, your arguments, or even your complaints, they are forced to sit in the quiet room of their own company, which is a state of being they find utterly unbearable. They possess no internal mechanism to soothe their own shame or settle their own racing emotions. So when that source disappears, the inner void becomes terrifyingly obvious to them. They are not mourning the loss of human connection, but rather experiencing a profound loss of control. They feel wounded because you exercised a sense of agency that they never gave you permission to have. You disrupted their artificial reality, and their immediate attempts to contact you are not about genuine love or real reconciliation. They are simply trying to reestablish a dynamic where they remain in total command. They are not searching for the real you, but rather looking for the compliant version of you that gave them everything they needed to feel comfortable in their own skin. Once you realize you were merely a useful utility in their eyes, the mystery behind their sudden reaction vanishes, leaving only the cold reality that their need for you was never truly about who you are. The concept of an ego injury is perhaps the most critical key to understanding why they react with such extreme volatility when you go silent. To a healthy individual, a breakup or a loss is certainly a painful event, but it can eventually be processed through normal grief, self-reflection, and personal growth. However, this type of person is fundamentally incapable of internal processing because their entire identity rests upon a fragile and grandiose facade. They carry a deep unconscious reservoir of hidden shame that they spend their entire lives trying to outrun every single day. When you remove yourself from their sphere of control, you are not just stating that you want to move on. You are landing a direct, undeniable blow to that fragile ego. This damage is experienced as an absolute catastrophe within their mind, because they view themselves as superior and inherently entitled to your continuous focus. Your decision to walk away is viewed as a severe betrayal of their reality. They cannot conceive of any scenario where they are the problem, so they instantly attribute your departure to your weakness, your instability, or your spite. The deep wound occurs because you shattered the custom script where they were the heroic main character and you were the obedient sidekick. By choosing absolute silence, you take back the power of definition. You define the relationship is over, and they are left completely without a say in the matter. That loss of control is unbearable for them to sit with. Their reaction to this injury is marked by an immediate and reflexive defensive impulse. They never pause to reflect on their own toxic behavior or wonder why you might have been pushed away. Instead, they pivot instantly to blinding rage or a performative version of victimhood. The intense rage is a desperate attempt to regain dominance and make you so exhausted that you will return just to stop the fighting. If that aggressive approach fails, they quickly switch to a dramatic story of self-pity to collect sympathy from everyone around them. They need to flip the narrative immediately, because if they were to sit with the truth of that injury for even a second, they would have to face the hollow core beneath the mask. Your departure forces them to confront the fact that they could not hold on to you, which serves as ultimate proof that their power is nothing more than a fragile illusion. That is a reality they will fight with everything they have to suppress. When they realize that your initial silence is not just a brief emotional outburst, but a sustained and permanent boundary, they instinctively move into the tactical phase of hoovering. This term describes their primary instinct to pull you back into the orbit of their control. At this point, they are not driven by genuine remorse, nor have they experienced a sudden epiphany about the damage they caused over time. Instead, they are dealing with an urgent functional crisis. They lost a steady source of emotional stability, and their immediate objective is to test the strength of your silence. They want to know if you are truly gone forever, or if they can still reach you with the right mix of emotional manipulation. These re-engagement tactics often begin in very subtle ways, because they want to protect themselves from facing another direct rejection. You might receive a random text asking a casual question, a shared link that supposedly reminded them of you, or news of a sudden crisis in their life that only you can help solve. Make no mistake, these are calculated bait maneuvers. They are specifically crafted to hook your empathy, trigger your natural curiosity, or exploit your lingering sense of responsibility. They are counting on the fact that your human kindness remains intact. If you respond at all, even with a firm message demanding to be left alone, they consider it a total victory. By extracting any reaction, they confirm that they still occupy valuable real estate in your mind and hold enough influence to force a response. If those subtle tricks do not work, they escalate to a dramatic show of false humility, where they offer sweeping apologies or promises of personal transformation. They might admit to tiny, insignificant flaws while completely skipping over the core abuse, just to see if you will accept tiny crumbs of regret. They will play the role of the amazing person you originally fell for, acting out the ideal image that only existed during the very beginning. This is a polished, theatrical performance rather than a genuine change of heart. They are merely testing the lock on the door you slammed shut. Every single time you interact or ponder whether to text back, you signal to them that the door remains slightly open. True silence leaves zero room for these tests, because they will keep trying to pull you back until they receive undeniable proof that their influence has been permanently destroyed. When it becomes obvious that basic bait tactics will not drag you back, their behavior undergoes a sharp and disturbing shift toward active devaluation. This is no longer about testing the waters, but about aggressive damage control and the weaponization of your absence. Because they cannot process the intense shame of being rejected, they must actively export that shame by painting you as the villain of the story. This shift into a full smear campaign is a protective strategy meant to discredit you beforehand by framing you as chaotic, ungrateful, or completely irrational to mutual contacts. Through this tactic, they accomplish two goals simultaneously. They shield their public reputation and ensure that if you ever try to speak your truth, your words will be viewed through the negative lens they carefully crafted. This phase of devaluation is deeply vindictive. They are trying to reclaim the control they lost the moment you decided to put your own well-being first. They are essentially trying to terminate you from the relationship before you can officially close the chapter yourself. They need to convince themselves that you left because you are toxic, as this allows them to bypass the terrifying realization that they are incapable of keeping a healthy connection. They will rewrite the history of your past interactions, blowing your smallest mistakes out of proportion while completely erasing their own destructive patterns. It is a systematic character assassination meant to make you feel isolated and defensive, ideally baiting you into breaking your silence just to correct the record. The greatest danger right now is that many victims feel a desperate urge to defend their reputation against these lies. However, that defensive reaction is exactly what they are waiting for. Any attempt on your part to fix the story or argue against their version of events is celebrated as a win, giving them fresh material and proof that they still drive your emotions. They do not care about the truth or finding real closure. They are simply fishing for a dramatic reaction that validates their new storyline. The only way to survive this devaluation is to see it for what it truly is, which is the desperate act of someone who has run out of ways to control you directly. By holding your peace and refusing to participate in their public drama, you effectively disarm their strongest weapon, leaving their lies to fade away without an audience to feed them. If you are currently standing firm in your decision to remain silent and feel the sudden urge to break it, pause for a second, subscribe to this channel, and drop a comment below declaring that you are staying strong. Let us build a supportive community so you never have to navigate this path by yourself. Their tendency to jump into a new relationship immediately after you leave is rarely a sign that they have moved on, and it certainly does not mean they found a better partner. Instead, it is an urgent survival tactic for their fragile mental state. When you step away completely, they are left sitting in an uncomfortable vacuum where they are forced to confront their own emptiness and the sting of your departure. Because they lack the capacity for honest introspection or self-soothing, this state of being feels utterly agonizing to them. They feel compelled to fill that space right away, not out of a desire for authentic intimacy, but out of a desperate need to outsource their emotional stability to someone new. In their mind, people are completely interchangeable assets. They view partners as functional objects meant to deliver specific services like constant validation, an attentive audience, social status, or emotional containment. When you withdraw your energy, you cease to function as a useful appliance, so they simply go out to secure a fast replacement. They will often leap into a new romance with shocking speed. They will take the exact same script, the exact same charm, and the exact same manipulative moves they used on you and apply them to a new target. This new person was not selected for their unique character, but rather for their availability and willingness to provide the immediate ego boost required to patch up their wounded pride. This quick transfer serves the double purpose of numbing their discomfort and providing a convenient distraction. By crowding their life with a new interest, they successfully drown out the quiet thoughts of your absence. They are deeply terrified of being left alone with their true self, so they create a rapid sequence of new drama to ensure they never have to face their inability to form a real connection. It is also a passive-aggressive maneuver designed to hurt you deeply. They want you to see them looking happy or settled, hoping that your feelings of being replaced will trigger your self-doubt and drive you back into their arms. You must realize that this new setup is just another performative play. It is a hollow dynamic built on the exact same shaky foundation as your past relationship, and it is destined to follow the exact same path of devaluation and ultimate discard once the new target fails to satisfy their endless hunger for attention. This sudden move is frequently misread as proof that they have truly moved forward or finally found their ideal match, but in reality, it remains a desperate defense against emotional collapse. When you maintain complete distance, you effectively cut off the steady flow of energy that keeps their artificial identity inflated. Left alone in the quiet, they are forced to face their inner darkness, a place of intense shame that they are terrified to inhabit. Because they lack the tools for processing pain, they bypass grief entirely. They categorize human beings strictly by utility rather than treating them as real individuals with feelings. When you go silent, you have effectively broken down in their mind, rendering you an unusable tool. Consequently, they head out to find a substitute as quickly as me. This is not about building something meaningful, but about securing a new vessel to absorb their projection and provide the fast supply needed to quiet their internal noise. The new target is usually chosen for their vulnerability and readiness to accept the fast love-bombing phase used to trap them. This rapid transition is also a calculated piece of social theater. By parading a new partner, they try to send a message that you never mattered, and that they can easily flourish without you. They want you to believe that you were the problem all along, and that this new person is receiving the happiness you supposedly denied them. However, it is all a polished illusion. The new bond rests on the same empty foundation, destined to repeat the same predictable and destructive cycle. They are merely transferring their continuous hunger to a new host, terrified that if they stop moving, they will be forced to face the reality that they cannot experience true depth or lasting connection. The martyr storyline is one of the most insidious tools in their arsenal, deployed specifically when aggressive moves or basic hoovering fail to lure you back into the fold. When you hold your boundaries, they face an existential dilemma. They must explain your disappearance to the world in a way that protects their image as the noble, long-suffering partner. Because they cannot accept personal responsibility, they build a narrative that frames your silence not as a healthy boundary, but as an act of calculated cruelty on your part. By presenting themselves as the victim who was abandoned without cause, they effectively weaponize your silence against you. This story cleanses their public reputation while gathering a protective group of supporters who will validate their distorted version of reality.